welcome everybody. As Fatima mentioned, we're trying to move out a little bit and talk a little bit more than economics, even though I run the Economic Forecast Project. I think what we all care about is really the quality of life we have in our community. And that leads us to sort of thinking about what is a community and what we want and need. And so, I'm going to talk a little bit about economics, of course, throughout the next few years, but we also want to branch off and do this quality of life. So, but before we get started, interesting data come out yesterday from the U.S. Department of the Census. It's per capita income by county in every state. If I could do a poll, I would do that. So you can probably guess what the highest per capita income in county is in our state. If you guessed Marin, you'd be right. Marin County. It's 145,575. That's per capita income in Marin. The lowest, you won't guess it because most of you have never heard of the county, but it's Del Norte County. It's 40,000. So what a difference, huh? Between Marin, 145,000 and Del Norte, 40,000. It's crazy. Santa Barbara, by the way, is 15th highest out of the 58 counties. We're at 67,879. Now, that's a remarkable number when you think about it, because we know what it looks like. We know the wealth that we have and the income we have in lots of Santa Barbara. But what that number tells me is what beautiful diversity we have here in Santa Barbara. I mean, we have very super wealthy people. And unfortunately, we have a lot of people who are less well off. But it makes for a very diverse community, which makes us better in lots of ways, but also challenges in many dimensions. What these numbers represent is, you can imagine in Marin County, almost everyone's the same. I mean, a very, very low diversity, which also means low income inequality. So that's one of the issues that we certainly have to deal with. But as I mentioned, life is a lot more than just income. And this series that I want to start working on, we want to work, dig a little bit deeper into issues like housing, education, food security, water and air quality, and public safety. And if you look at that list, that's a list that we all want in our community. We want to feel safe. We want to have food to eat. We want to have good housing and good education. So that's something that every community in the world is really looking for. And so we're going to start off today with talking a little bit about public safety. And I'm very, very honored, and we're privileged to have Bill Brown and Dr. Melekian with us talking about public safety. Now, Sheriff Brown was first elected here back in 2006, I believe, started serving in 2007. Started off in Pacifica, California, which is very close to where I grew up. So I know that area well. Moved to Inglewood, and then he moved to Idaho, Moscow, Idaho, then Lompoc, and I don't know where else, but long history in public administration. Bill received a master's degree from USC, and we don't have time for me to go through all the awards that Bill has won. So it's just great to have Bill here. And then we have Dr. Barney Melekian. Barney received a Ph.D. from USC. He's been in law enforcement for, I hate to put numbers on these things because it's kind of, it's 46 some years or something. Spent about 2 decades in Santa Monica, 13 years in Pasadena, 4 years as the director of the Office of Community-Oriented Policing Services. I think that was under the Obama administration, I believe. Eric Holder hired Barney, wonderful position. Won a leadership award from the Police Executive Research Forum. That's a national award. So both these guys have tremendous careers, but looks to me like they can't even hold a job, but that's okay. So anyway, I want to get started a little bit, and something that we've all read about in the last few months is the incredible increase in homicides we've seen throughout the United States. California's homicides were up 30% compared to from 2019 to 2020. There are some states that were up over 60%. This is the largest increase in homicides basically since records have been kept in 1905. And there they were kept actually by the CDC because they have to, when they do autopsies and stuff, they have to say how people died. So it could even be longer than 1905. So this is a crazy increase in in homicide. So one thing I'd like to ask each of you is, what are you seeing trend-wise locally, not just homicides, but other forms of crime? You know, where are we headed? I see some declines in lots of places, but you're the expert. So either one can start. We'll have a nice conversation.
I never try to get in front of the sheriff, so.
Good idea. Go ahead.
All right, I'll jump in because I can just give you some numbers about homicides countywide, and just to give you an idea of where we fit into what you just said, Peter. And thank you for inviting Barney and I to be with you in this. It's we've both been involved and attended the economic forums that you've put on for many years, and appreciate the service that you do to the community by providing such a great view of the economics of our county.
Great, thank you.
Just to put into perspective where we are as a county, and these numbers I'm about to give you are not county numbers, i.e. the sheriff. These are county numbers inclusive of the police agencies in our county. And we have a relatively low number of law enforcement agencies in our county. We have 445,000 or so people in the county. We have 8 incorporated cities in the county. Of those 8 cities, the sheriff's office provides police protection for 4 of them. And the cities of Santa Barbara, Lompoc, Santa Maria, and Guadalupe each have their own police department, as does the University of California at Santa Barbara and Allen Hancock College up in Santa Maria. So those are the police agencies of the county, if you will. And so the numbers that I'm about to give you, that correlates to what you just spoke about, is the amalgamation of all of those agencies and their numbers. And when you look at what happened in 2020 compared to 2021, we are actually exceeding the state average. We have averaged for the past 20 years about 14 homicides a year, and that's countywide, all agencies. This past year in 2020, we had 20 homicides. So that's a 43% increase of where we were. And as you mentioned, this is not a local phenomenon. It's a national as well as a state phenomenon. You see homicide rates are up all over the place. Fortunately, our numbers are small enough in the aggregate to make it hard to discern true patterns. But there's absolutely no question that we're seeing an increase in violent crime, in serious violent crime on a countywide basis. And it's not reflected just in homicides. We've seen an increase, you know, when we do drill down into it, an increase in what I would call drive-by homicides, where particularly in the North County, where you're having oftentimes rival gang members involved in shootings that occur on drive-by type shootings. And we're seeing a clear negative trend with respect to shootings in challenged neighborhoods in Lompoc and in Santa Maria in particular. Particularly hard hit, but the rest of the county has not been immune to it either. And we started the year off with a double murder in the South County that was in our jurisdiction, but that was committed by suspects who came from the city of Santa Barbara. So there's a blend of all of these that are taking place across the county. We had a 26% increase in firearm assaults between 2019 and 2020. And thus far in 2021, we're on track for a 54% increase in firearm assaults over 2020. So it's an exponential increase that we've seen in this gun violence that has occurred in the county. And it's just to give you an idea of the magnitude of it, in Lompoc alone, city of 43,000 people or so, there have been 64 shooting incidents to date so far this year. And now not all of those have resulted in people that have been hit and certainly killed, but nevertheless, there's been essentially gunfire and gun battles, 64 of those for a city of 43,000, which is a major concern to all of us. There's definitely a proliferation in the availability of firearms. There's an increase in the number of ghost guns that we're seeing. These are weapons that are made from sterile gun parts that don't have serial numbers. They're not sold through a gun dealer. There's no background check being conducted on someone who buys these parts and adjusts them and makes them into a firearm. And so we're really concerned about the most serious crime that we've seen this significant increase in. And it hasn't occurred necessarily in a lot of the more affluent areas. It hasn't occurred in a lot of different parts of the county have been pretty much immune to it, but much of it has been concentrated in a couple of cities. But there have been other offshoots of it in different parts of the county.
Okay.
Yeah, Peter, let me echo the sheriff in saying thank you for letting us appear before you and this audience today. I too have very much appreciated your work. The economic forecast does. Santa Barbara has been a little bit of an outlier in terms of the trends, the overall trends that the sheriff spoke of. Our violent crime rate has actually declined from last year. Although we started out with 3 homicides in the first 6 weeks of the year, and we've had several shooting incidents since, but the total number compared to this same time year-to-date last year is down fairly significantly. We had our homicides are up by 1, but our aggravated assaults are just about the same. We had 345 last year, we had 347 this year. Where we've seen a significant increase is in commercial burglaries and in arsons. Commercial burglaries are part of a LA-based theft ring, sometimes referred to as a South American theft group. We've worked with particularly the Sheriff's Carpinteria Station and our people. We made some arrests, but they have been active. A lot of the arsons are related to the homeless encampments earlier in the year, and I know we might talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Those have seemingly declined over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
I see. So, yeah, I mean, do you have a sense of what's happening? I mean, any ideas? Is it COVID related? I mean, people, cooped in their houses, or gangs getting, restless. I haven't read anything where people are pointing any fingers at anything that they can really speak to. Any thoughts there?
I can't speak to the North County issues. I'll let the sheriff do that. I do think there is at least some speculation that some of the more sophisticated gangs from Ventura and the South County of Santa Barbara have sort of come to the conclusion that the issue of street violence is not serving any purpose except to draw unwanted attention. And we're still kind of pursuing that to see if that's just an urban street myth or there's actually something to it. But we are looking at that.
Okay. And how about things like domestic abuse or, things along that nature?
Again, that has stayed. There has been a slight increase, but it's pretty much the same as it was last year.
Yeah. And one thing I could add, and what Bill had mentioned, our numbers are pretty small, relatively speaking. And so, sometimes, if there's only 13 or 14 things happening and it goes up by 2, it looks like percentage-wise it's gone up by a real lot. So those trends are really hard to tease out of the data when they're such small numbers.
I do have to say that I think the numbers that the sheriff gave with regards to North County are significant. And I suspect that there is a little bit, or maybe more than a little bit, an economic factor in the level of violence in the South County versus North County.
Yeah, I certainly think that's the case. And I think that, it's important to put it into perspective as well. As you say, Peter, that is in the smaller numbered, more serious crimes that occur, any shift can look like a very big percentage increase. But we have seen a very significant jump this year that we have not seen heretofore. And since it's a national trend, there has been a lot of speculation. What effect did the the lockdown have on people? What affected, people weren't spending money on trips and vacations and going out to eat. So gun sales were significantly higher,
Right.
as a result, and maybe people had some extra disposable income. So maybe there are more guns being purchased by people and more guns available to people. That's been whether it's a causation or whether it's a correlation, that's something that has been identified. But the reality is that that Santa Maria and Lompoc, and to some degree Santa Barbara, all suffer from gang related issues that are deeply rooted in the community. They are multi-generational gangs that have been here for years and years and years. And many of these people, are children of people who are gang members, who are themselves children of people who are gang members. So it's difficult sometimes to get people to break out of that lifestyle and of that association, where it's so ingrained in your family, in your neighborhood, in the way you grow up. And there's a lot of great things that people are doing to try to provide positive things for young people to do and so forth. But it's really hard when they go back to a home that the parents or the people who are there as adults in the home are emulating that. So I think that, when you look overall, for the first 9 months of 2021, it's not just violent crime. We're looking at seeing some increases that concern us, particularly with drugs and drug crimes. We've seen a prevalence of drugs throughout the community, and most disturbing, a significant increase in the number of overdose deaths that have occurred in the county. Just to give you an idea, last year we had 114 people die in this county as a result of drug overdose, and that is up from previous year numbers. In a big way. The year before that, I'm looking through some sheets here, so bear with me. The year before that, the drug numbers were down in the 90s. The year before that, they were in the 80s, and as you go beyond that, it was in the 60s and the 40s and the 30s. So we've seen over the course of the last, say, 6, 7, 8 years, a tremendous spike in drug use and drug death. And a lot of that can be attributed to drugs like fentanyl that are incredibly powerful illicit drugs that people who get hooked on opiates, whether they are hooked on a legal opioid as a pain reliever, or whether they become hooked on heroin. And as fentanyl becomes more and more available and less expensive, people buy it and don't realize how concentrated and how powerful it is. They use it and they end up killing themselves with it. So it's really a disturbing trend that we're seeing throughout the county.
Yeah.
And something that, again, may be impacted not only by conditions of the county, but also by changes in the law. We've seen a decriminalization of certain types of drug offenses and certain types of theft offenses, which we believe has affected the numbers. What's being reported, what are we comparing to in years gone by versus what we have now? Because the goalposts have been changed in terms of what type of crime is a felony, what type of crime is someone really being held accountable for in the criminal justice system. There's been a shift to look at drug use as being a health problem rather than a crime problem, which in many ways has been good in terms of getting more treatment available and getting people to conquer their addictions through that. But there's also, historically, drug treatment relies on a carrot and stick approach, and without the criminal justice system being there as the stick, it creates problems for people who oftentimes, sadly, fall back into their old habits. They fall back into company with their so-called friends. They fall back into, doing a line of dope or putting a needle in their arm. And then the next thing you know, they're back into what they were trying to break out of as a result of that treatment.
Right. Yeah, so that kind of answers a couple of questions. I usually save all the questions till the end, but these are, someone just asked, how does the change in public policy and statutory law with respect to pretrial and post-conviction incarceration affect crime? You kind of answered that. And then one other one about gangs. I just want to get back to gangs, and someone asked about drug cartels and MS-13. Are we seeing any activity there? Or these are more just local?
I think in Santa Barbara we have some reason to believe that there is some MS-13 influence in terms of what decisions are being made by local street gangs in terms of what they're doing and not doing. But I don't know that that's particularly new. I think that's been here. I think it's been here for a while. I think what I was alluding to earlier is I think there may be a sort of a shift in what their focus is from street activity to maybe a little bit more drug-based sales and transport.
Yeah. I mean, that's certainly a hard one. I mean, the gang-related stuff is, like you said, Barney, it's not clear what we can do. And Bill, I mean, how do you deal with that? It's very hard to determine. But another person just asked, it seems like we've seen a lot of DUIs out there, accidents involving DUI. Have you seen a trend in that? I mean, is that also maybe COVID related somehow?
It's possible that it's COVID. We have seen a fairly dramatic increase, about 49% increase over last year in terms of alcohol related traffic collisions. We've had actually we've had more than two, but two recently fatal traffic collisions, one of which is not clear whether alcohol was a factor, and one the other night on Carrillo very clearly was, alcohol was a factor. And I think there is, I mean, again, I don't have data to back this up, but I do think there is the sense that people have been feeling pent up for a long time, and they're anecdotally, I was talking to a group of motor officers from various jurisdictions yesterday at a promotional event, and they were saying that kind of everywhere that it's like people forgot how to drive during COVID. The number of things like red lights and stop signs and those kind of things definitely seems to be on the uptick.
I see. Okay, so that, thanks for those updates. So I want to turn things over a little bit. Given what's happened, over the last few years with various incidents across the U.S. and really the social environment that we've been seeing in terms of policing, and that has to have a major effect on you guys for sure, especially things like recruiting, retainment of officers. I heard from the manager up in Santa Maria, that like they have 0 applications, for the police academy, things like that in various places. And, given we've seen this sort of increase in homicides and gang-related crimes, so what's your view of sort of policing in this environment?
I'll go first on that one. I think it's very challenging. There's a couple things that have gone on. Our recruitment efforts have stayed fairly constant. What has changed is the number of people that show up for various entry-level tests. But the quality of people we're getting and the number of people we're taking into the system has remained fairly constant. The challenge has been retention. We've lost people, and the people that we're losing fall into 2 categories. One is there are some people, especially because Santa Barbara is a commuter, at least for the police department, is a commuter city, meaning that less than 20% of our officers live on the South Coast. Many of them commute from Ventura and Camarillo and Oxnard and Ventura County. But I had some officers. I had one who just recently left, very quality applicant. She'd been commuting to Santa Barbara from Glendale for 2.5 years, and she just took a job with the Glendale Police Department. That's not something I can argue against. That's, you know, that's a quality of life decision that she made, and that goes to some bigger issues about how do we make housing available for people. But I have lost 4 or 5 people, officers, just in the 8 months that I've been doing this interim role, who have simply decided that the profession, they're unsure about public support. They're unsure about the support of elected officials, and they're afraid of what will happen if they're involved in an incident, and that becomes, you know, they somehow become the, you know, the focus of community outrage. And I've been saying it for a number of years, that both the sheriff and I have been in this business long enough. We've seen various sea changes in terms of what's the philosophy and what's the reform. We both lived through community policing. We both lived through kind of the end of the professional model of policing that was in place. This is another one. And I don't question that over the next 5 or 10 years, policing is going to change again. And that's fine. But we can't denigrate the men and women that do this work while we're in the process of reforming it. And unfortunately, the national narrative has become very, very counterproductive in terms of what the overwhelming number of men and women who do this work do every day.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that a little bit, Peter, on Barney's comments. I think he's spot on. You know, I think that the national conversation has made things much more difficult for us as a profession to get people not only into the entry-level ranks, by the way, but to get people to want to step up and be at the top ranks in our profession. I sent Barney an email the other day that I saw that there was a medium-sized city in Kansas that recruited for a police chief. They ended up getting 1 applicant. So they basically had 1 person after a search, you know, in their community and advertising a position, 1 applicant that they were actually exploring, because I was the only person that did. I don't know if they ended up hiring the person or not. But, you know, I mean, Barney knows when he competed for the Pasadena job, you know, when I competed for the job, even in Moscow, Idaho, there were 175 applicants for that job. When I competed for the Lompoc job, there were 50 applicants. And now, you know, it's tough to get people to even apply for the position because there's just that many fewer people that want to be police chiefs. And it is, that's a sad commentary. But it's the same at the entry level. And I think it's really important on us as leaders to let our people know, let our communities know that, hey, you can't paint us with a brush that you're using because of an incident that occurred in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That didn't happen in Santa Barbara. It wouldn't happen in Santa Barbara. We have a professional expectation of our people. We go to great lengths to hire the right people and train the right people in the right way and instill in them a philosophy that we won't tolerate it if they don't treat people the right way. Yeah. And, you know, it's really discouraging for our people who are doing the right work and the right type of approach to the job to all of a sudden then be categorized, you know, as, oh, policing, you know, is inherently racist. It's brutal. It's hopelessly broken. We have to reimagine everything about policing, and that's just not. That's a false narrative. And I think we have to be courageous enough to stand up and to say that, so that the community understands that this is a noble profession. And we need noble men and women who will come into this profession and be willing to put themselves in harm's way for other people, and to be the type of example to others in the community that are going to eventually fill many other important roles in the community as well.
Right.
And I think, you know, Barney and I talk about this all the time.
Yeah.
And I really believe, and I think I'm speaking for him too, that, you know, we truly believe that the majority of people, no matter what their political beliefs, no matter what their what side of the political line they are on, they want essentially the same thing. They want order in the public square. They want safety in their neighborhoods. And they don't want less policing. They want fair policing.
Sure.
And effective policing. And, you know, I think it's incumbent upon us as police executives to make sure that we're doing everything we can do to provide that. And I think if we do that, I think our people will still, even with the negatives, derive enough satisfaction in what they do to keep them on the course of their career.
Yeah, I mean, Barney, you mentioned, you know, community policing, how we do that, and things will be, there will be a change. So how do you implement that change? What is it you're doing to try to get people, you know, here maybe it's a little bit easier to understand the role of policing and about fair policing and things like that? I mean, I have one incident that I keep telling people about. I was, my son was a hockey player and he was playing down in Oxnard. And so I would drop him off and I'd go over to the collection and go to Starbucks and have a coffee. And more than once, a police officer in that area would come over and sit down with just random people and just talk, like, how's things going? What's going on? You know, what are you seeing out there? And just really having a conversation with the community. You know, it's for me, it's trying to say, it's not us versus them. You know, we're here for you, you know? And so, you know, so I'd like to understand a little bit how you're seeing that. I mean, my idea has always been, you know, we should give our police officers, you know, Hawaiian shirts, you know, and have them walk down the street with Hawaiian shirts and be friendly. And, you know, so somehow you just have to change the environment, you know, so that people understand this, that they're there for them, you know. So what are you doing to implement that kind of behavior?
I think one of the things that's important to remember is that particularly here in Santa Barbara, both the police department and the sheriff's department have been doing that for years. I mean, this is, you know, this didn't just, we didn't just wake up, you know, in the summer of 2020, oh, you know, we should try this community policing thing and maybe it'll work. They've been doing it here. I could spend hours on what I think the changes are going to be, and we don't have that. I will give you one very straightforward example that when I first started here, and one of the tenets of 21st century policing has been reverence for life. That's one of the underlying things. And there was an incident up on State Street where a gentleman was out in traffic. He was wheeling a metal pole. He was attacking people that were on the sidewalk. The officers got there. He went after the officers with this pole. And I can tell you that legally and morally, they could have used lethal force to end that incident, and they did not. And I thought, well, this is really fantastic. So I want to find out, you know, how this is up, because I want to be able to tell this story. And what I found is that there have been, at least in the 12 months before I got here, there were at least 10 incidents that fell into that category. And since I started, there have been 7 incidents, one as recently as 2 weeks ago. A guy with a knife at Laguna and Haley, attacking people, attacking the officers, and on 2 distinct occasions, they could have used lethal force and did not. That reverence for life, that whole essence of community policing, which is really about building relationships and solving neighborhood problems, it's what we do here. And as you know, I worked for the sheriff for almost 4 years, and that was the philosophy of the deputies on the street. And so it's community policing can always be refined. There are always ways to do it better. I mean, I could list off a half a dozen things we're doing that are going to make changes in that area. But this, I have to repeat myself, this is not new for here.
Yeah, that's true.
And Peter, if I could just add one thing, you know, you started this with saying this was really a conversation as much about quality of life as about, you know, the number of crimes or how much people make in a household or whatever. the reality is the definition of community policing really incorporates that. Really, community policing is not magic. It's just basically, it's when the police and members of the community come together and work together to identify and solve problems that are related to crime, the fear of crime, neighborhood decay, and quality of life. And really, it's important to remember that it's not a police problem. It's not just the police that are going to solve that problem. We can't solve it on our own. We have to solve it in collaboration and in partnership with others and with the community. And really, we're getting really good at that in Santa Barbara County. We have, we've identified mental illness, we've identified drug abuse, we've identified, underlying issues that occur in criminality. People coming into our jail who themselves have been victimized, who have themselves gone through horrific childhoods and ended up, unsurprisingly becoming people who victimize other people. But, and we're working hard to adopt programs and services that we can provide and make available to them so that they can revitalize their lives, that they can turn themselves around and not be in the revolving door of criminal justice, coming back into jail and back into the community, victimizing people. We want to see people who go into jail come out as people who can become productive members of the community, not destructive members of the community. And we know we can't, get to all of them. We know that there's always going to be a fairly healthy percentage of people who are going to reoffend. But we know also that there's a big chunk, maybe 20 or 30% that have the potential to really turn things around other than on their own. There's another chunk that can turn themselves around, and they won't come back. Right. But this chunk in the middle that we really want to look at, it's like compound interest if we can get them, to not offend. It's something that's paid forward, not just to them and to their generation, but to future generations as well. And we've gotten really, really good, and it's really exciting to see what's happening in our county, to have so many different disciplines come together in health and in nonprofits, in non-government organizations, in neighborhoods, in advocacy groups, working hand in hand with law enforcement to address some of these key issues. And as a result of that, I think we're far in advance of most other communities. And as bad as those crime numbers sounded at the beginning of our discussion today, they pale in comparison to what's going on in Los Angeles, in the Bay Area, in San Diego, in other places. The reality is our numbers are up, but they're still well below not only other areas, but they're well below other eras. Right. And we were in the early 1980s, crime was through the roof. And, we have seen crime is like a roller coaster. It goes up, it goes down. We have to try and figure out why and address those issues. But it's really important. And I think, we really believe that community policing is one of the keys to addressing crime in our communities, that the community can become involved in it. It's going to be much more successful than if they're trying to just rely on us to solve the problem.
Yeah. So one of the attendees, Lester Hendrickson, just wrote this. This is not a question, rather kudos. Wife and I had coffee with a cop in our neighborhood. Great program to introduce us to officers and give us confidence in their handling of problems. We strongly support our police. I mean, that's what you want to hear that's what you want to hear. I think that's great. I mean, that's where we really have to be going, I think. So, a couple of tough questions, I think, that like more than one attendee has asked. How are you guys handling the vaccinations, or people on the force refusing to be vaccinated, or, whatever?
Well, I think I have an easier answer than I suspect the sheriff does, because vaccines aren't mandated in the city yet. So we're still dealing with the issue of attestation forms. There's no question this is an incredibly divisive issue, and I suspect that at some point, vaccines are going to be mandated in the city, perhaps, although I know there's a number of court challenges going on. But right now, we haven't had to deal with it directly because it's not required.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Peter, in the county, we do have a quasi mandate, I guess you could say. It's basically the mandate is that you, as a county employee, must either be vaccinated or you must submit to a weekly testing to determine if you're COVID-19 positive or not. And we have, there was a newspaper article that wasn't very clear actually about what's really going on. The testing process itself has been questioned by the deputy sheriff's union in terms of the type of information a third party is requiring of them before they will test their samples. And so they've made it a meet and confer issue, and meet and confer issues really legally have to be sorted out before the changes are made. So that's why there are some in our organization who have not gone through the testing as of now. I will say that we have been doing weekly testing on all of our staff in the jail for, essentially throughout the pandemic. So, and we're still doing that. So anybody that works in the jail is being regularly tested as a result of that policy. And so it's not that nobody is being tested, but we hire people from the community, from the human race, and we have people that have different opinions, just like they do in the community. And some people are, are adamant in their concern about vaccine and don't want to put vaccine into their body, and they feel extremely strongly about it, as do many in the community. And I know there's many arguments to be made that, well, the rest of us have to be protected and we have to go through this and so forth. But we can't, I don't think we can single out law enforcement. I think if we're going to require vaccines, they need to be required of everybody, every employee, if it's going to be on an employer basis. But I don't think you can single out law enforcement. And I will say we're doing everything we can. I got vaccinated very early and very publicly with my people to try to show the example. I'm not asking you to do anything that I wouldn't do. I just got my booster shot last week.
Yeah.
The reality is that, we have taken steps through education and encouragement to get people to get more of our people to get vaccinated. We've teamed up with doctors. We've developed educational videos. We've shared stories. We've done a number of different things that we can do, but we're getting to the point, frankly, where the number of people that are left, not only in our organization, but in profession, but really in the community, are ones that are really feel the strongest about it, and they're they're difficult to persuade. Through the education and encouragement process. Whether or not there will be mandates is going to become a legal issue, I think, more so than anything else. It will have to be determined in the courts.
Yeah. So I kind of want to turn the tables a little bit now and kind of ask what we can do to help law enforcement, to help you guys in a couple different areas. So one is, I've actually done some economic work on crime, and recidivism is so big, especially with certain ethnicities and lower income and those kind of things. Recidivism is really, really big. I mean, so if we can stop those people from recurring, going back to jail or committing more crimes, to me, that's kind of the key. You may not agree with that, but I'll give somebody, okay, you did this once, for whatever reasons. What can we do as a community or as our local politicians to help figure out how to stop recidivism?
Barney, can I jump in there first, and you can
Please
come back? I think I would say, first of all, I agree with you 100%. If we can reduce recidivism, as I said before, it's kind of a gift that keeps on giving. So we need to do everything we can do to stop people coming back into jail. What we need to do is examine what is it that someone who's in jail who is released from jail, what do they need to be successful in the community? And it's pretty simple, Peter. There's 5 things that they need.
Yeah.
They need a place to live. They need some kind of a skill that they can market in the community, some kind of job that they can do, and either some training or education, or the ability and experience of having done that before to make themselves marketable. The third thing they need is a job. They can't be expected to assimilate back in the community if they don't have a means to make a living that they can survive on in the community and thrive on in the community.
Right.
They need to have their anger managed. Oftentimes people who are engaged in criminal activity have impulse control problems, and they do things on the spur of a moment or when they're under the influence of something, and have deep regret for it later. They have to have an ability to control their impulses. And then lastly, and I think perhaps most importantly, they have to have their addictions conquered. If they continue to be a drug addict or an alcoholic, the chances are that they are going to be back in jail in no time, because that will foul up all the rest of them, and that will drive them back into crime. It will push them perhaps into crime in the case of drug addiction. So I think we as a community have to come together to address those 5 things: housing, vocational training, job availability. Members of the community who are in business have to be willing to take a chance on someone who's an offender. And if they've paid their debt to society by doing their time in jail or completing their probation or whatever, if we don't have businesses that are willing to accept them into their employment and give them a chance, we can't expect for them to be successful in the community.
Yeah.
As far as we have lots and lots of great organizations that do a great job with counseling and with intervention in terms of impulse control and anger management. And then the drug addiction problem, like I mentioned to you, it's a major concern to us, and it's gotten worse. And we really need to come together as a community. I'm working right now to try to put together and develop an opioid task force to bring together people from throughout the community to look at this problem from a holistic point of view, not just a criminal justice, not just a health, not just a supply and demand issue, but rather from a 30,000-foot level. What can we as a community do? Because we have to have a lot of things in place if we're gonna solve this problem.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a tremendous amount that can be done. Tomorrow we are cutting a ribbon and dedicating the Northern Branch Jail, a new facility that has been custom designed, really with rehabilitation in mind. It has every single housing unit in that facility has a multi-purpose room to which we can bring counselors, teachers, members of faith-based communities. We can provide services to the inmates, not having to move inmates throughout a jail to a specific place to get that done.
Yep.
And the whole philosophy of that jail is going to be to make sure that people understand that they have control over their future. And if they make a choice, they can decide if they're going to continue in this revolving door and back in and out of the criminal justice system, or do they want to become productive members of the community. And if they do, then we'll do our best to give them the skills and the connections to be able to do that.
Yeah, so I can tell you right now, I'm more than willing to volunteer to go up and help educate any of those individuals. So, you can sign me up. I mean, you're not in charge of the jails, but you can certainly sign me up, and I'm sure.
Actually, I am in charge of the jails.
Oh, you are in charge of the jails.
I'd be happy to sign you up. One of the things is life skills. Teaching somebody how to balance a checkbook. That has never ever balanced a checkbook in their life. That's another. Those kinds of skills are incredibly important. So, and there's lots of things that can be done to provide some of these basic life skills, the appropriate education, the appropriate training, the appropriate counseling to people to give. And they're not all going to be successful. We know that.
No, for sure.
But we're going to try to focus and get a significant number of them to chart their way on a better path.
Yeah, I have one quick story. Real life story. So I was the chair of the econ department, and we had our accounting awards ceremony. And I go, and there's a student there who I'm sitting next to, and he's got something funny on his. He's wearing a suit. He's got something funny on his arms, and I remembered who the student was. He served 5 years in prison for armed robbery. He screwed up. He just decided to change his life. He went back and got it in prison, tattoos up and down his arms, body. He taped his shirt to his wrists so no one else would see his tattoos. He got a great job at a Big Four accounting firm. He won an award, an accounting award, because this kid was a smart kid. He screwed up once, right? So there are those stories out there. And that was a wonderful, wonderful story. We have just a few minutes left, so I just want to quickly turn to homelessness. And again, that's an area where I think the community can help. What are you guys doing now with, it's a big issue. I get emails every day from business owners, complaining about people sleeping on their doorsteps and, doing whatever. It's a national problem. I spend a lot of time in LA. It's just miserable. I mean, there's some streets that I won't go on. It's just too depressing. So how are we dealing with the homelessness situation? And what can we do to help the police?
Well,
You want to take that one?
yeah, I'll jump into that. And I think this problem has become somewhat almost intractable because of some social decisions that were made decades ago. When I was a brand new lieutenant in Santa Monica almost 40 years ago, and for those people who may not know, Santa Monica for the longest time was ground zero for the homeless in LA County. And they sent us to Santa Barbara to study how best to deal with the homeless, because Santa Barbara was on the cutting edge of how to do this. And 35 years later, when I moved to Santa Barbara and I was on the Fire and Police Commission for a while, I discovered that the police department was sending people to Santa Monica to learn how to deal with the homeless because Santa Monica was on the cutting edge. I think at the end of the day, and the sheriff has said it, and I've said it, there has to be, if we're going to do something, there's two factors that have to happen. And it is, I think a lot of what passes for compassion is false compassion. The failure of the collapse of the mental health system and the lack of drug and alcohol treatment facilities to take people has put people on the street, and it's created a right to die on the street. And the issue of how many of zero bail and how many people should be in jail has compounded that. But nobody that I know of is making a serious argument that jail is how to solve this problem. Yeah. But somehow there has to be two things. There has to be these facilities I mentioned. We have to increase those resources. And we have to remove some of the voluntary component to this, because a great number of these people do not meet the threshold of the legal threshold for unable to care for your own safety or the safety of others is so rigid that most people will never meet it. And then it becomes voluntary. And I recognize this is a kind of a contentious statement I make, but I feel very strongly about it, that we're not serving the people that actually need help. And so the police department does what it can. We have co-response teams, just like the sheriff does. If the county behavioral wellness comes up with another psychiatric social worker, I'm going to create a second team in spite of staffing shortages. We've done restorative policing work. We've got some excellent officers doing some excellent work, but there needs to be places to take people.
I mean, it's true. I mean, there's actually a lot of economists now, well, not a lot, but economists working on sort of this issue, how to deal with this. And the data obviously are hard to get at, but it's something like, everyone I think believes all the homeless are either on drugs or mentally unstable. It's just not true. I mean, there's a large fraction that, like you said, it's voluntary. They're there. They don't really have anywhere to go. And so I've been a big proponent of, we need a facility, downtown. Now you get into the political realm, right? That not in my backyard are we going to have a facility. But as a community, you know, we need to help them. We need to get them off the street, you know, and help them the best we can. And I think we're failing, to be honest. So again, you know, it's something that I'd like to, you know, if we can help the police department with the city council, the supervisors, we all have to do it together.
I go ahead, Barney.
I was just going to say, I think one of the realities of this is it really is bigger than the city or the county. There needs to be some fundamental changes in state and federal laws. Yeah,
good point. Good point.
And just to close this out, I guess I would say that, you know, Barney touched on this. It's not a one size fits all problem. It is you know, there are many different categories of homeless people, and we have to recognize that and address that. And you know, we have to sort of start to address the mental illness component and the drug component, which are probably driving the most visible part of the homeless problem. But we also have people who, through misfortune or choice, you know, don't want responsibility, don't want to be housed. And then we also have people, as I say, who just down on their luck. They've had, you know, just a perfect storm of economic trouble in their lives, and you know, and sometimes that's what drives it as well. And I think we have to be able to recognize and have resources for all of the different types of people who are in that terrible situation of not having a place to go home to every night.
I agree. Anyway, I just want to, you know, reiterate what I said at the beginning. You know, I can't tell you how much I respect the two of you and what you've done. You both had courageous careers. We are so fortunate to have you here in our community. And I can't respect you enough. So my thanks goes out, and I'm sure many other people feel the same way. I know you guys are busy. So thanks again. And I really appreciate all you said and being able to talk candidly with the two of you.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Peter, for having us.
You got it. Thanks, guys.
Take care.